He made me promise never to set foot on the farm. Tonight I broke it with his brass maple leaf key in one hand and a deed addendum in the other. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Snow hissed under the tires as I eased the truck beside the gate. The sign still read Mitchell Range 14, red letters ghosting through frost. I turned off the engine and let the night settle. The creak of wire, the dry whisper of poplars, a horse stamping somewhere out in the dark. Grief has a sound like a barn door you forgot to latch, swinging, never quite shut. The key was warm from my glove, maple leaf nicked on one corner, just as he'd carried it on his ring for 24 years. The paper under my other arm crackled. 2019 deed addendum, mineral rights. In Alberta, surface ownership doesn't guarantee mineral rights. Joshua bought both in the 2019 deed addendum. I hadn't known that until this morning. I clicked on my headlamp and found the small brass lock at the chain. The key turned with a stubborn little cough, then gave. I pushed the gate inward, its hinge complaining like an old storyteller, and drove in slow. Hoofprints stitched the lane. The house would be black. No one stayed here since Joshua's mother went into assisted living. He told me he paid a neighbor to check the pipes in winter. He never told me why I must never come. Maple Road. Inside, the house held that cold, wool blanket smell of a place shut too long. I set the papers on the kitchen table, oak, water rings like ancient lakes, and took off my gloves. I was 46 and a widow for 3 weeks. I kept my wedding band on because taking it off felt like a lie. Leaving it on felt like a promise I couldn't keep. I opened the envelope again to be certain it was real. The addendum carried Joshua's neat signature and a land titles stamp. There was also a county parcel map he'd folded into fourths, pen marks angling around the north quarter, a rectangle shaded pale gray, a sticky note in his square handwriting. Surface to me, minerals to me. Keep it quiet. The fridge hummed to life and startled me. I smiled at myself and poured tap water, letting the pipes cough their way back. That was the sound of a system remembering. I set my phone to record as habit, reading the header details out loud. Deed addendum. Land Titles Office, Calgary, May 14, 2019. Registration number 19178443. Saying, numbers made them real. A quiet horse, a soft thud came from the yard hooves. Unpacked snow. I killed the headlamp and peered through the back window. The dark edge of our old gelding, Scout, shifted under the liento. He tossed once, breathed a small cloud, and settled. I went out, the cold scissoring my breath, and pressed my forehead to his. He smelled like hay and clean dust. This was the closest thing to prayer I had left. A light washed the far fence, then went out. Not a star headlights. I stood very still. A phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. I declined it and the voicemail landed within seconds. I listened. A man's voice, smooth and practiced. Mrs. Mitchell, this is Cole Parsons with North Strike Resources. We represent a party with interest in Range 14. We're nearby. Would you be willing to meet about a friendly surface use agreement, a friendly offer, at 10 p.m., at a place I wasn't supposed to be? I looked at the addendum on the table and understood this wasn't about fence posts. I replayed the message and wrote the number along the margin of the parcel map. My fingers steadied. Joshua's secret wasn't romance or shame. It was leverage, and leverage attracts company in trucks without logos. I locked the back door, switched the headlamp back on, and slid the addendum into a clear sleeve. The county map went behind it, the sticky note on top like a flag. I tucked the maple key into my pocket and checked the time. 10:11 p.m. Another light swept the lane and died. Whoever they were, they knew the road. My phone lit again, no caller. Ideon went quiet. Snow began to fall, a fine sift that blunted sound. I set the sleeve of documents flat on the table, pressed my palm over Joshua's signature, and made myself a clean promise. If I stayed, I'd be cornered. If I left, I'd be hunted. So I did neither. I called back. Mr. Parsons, I said, and let the silence say the rest. You have exactly 1 minute to tell me what you think you know. His answer would decide whether I dialed the RCMP or opened the front door. Until the surrogate court grants probate on Joshua's will, I cannot sell, encumber, or sign any surface use deal on the farm. Everything waits on that order. Home ledger by morning. The kitchen in our Calgary townhouse smelled like weak coffee and winter boots. I laid out 3 stacks on the table. Mortgage, utilities, and tuition for my daughter, Lena. Widow math is simple and cruel. What comes in What must go out, and what you pray can wait. Joshua's life insurance would cover the mortgage for a while, but the insurer wanted the original death certificate and a notarized claim form. Both were still in flight. I breathed through it and wrote dates in the margins. Dates made fear behave. I texted Lena to have a good day and not worry if I was in meetings. She replied with a heart and a photo of her study notes. Each line ruled neat like her father's. I let myself miss him for 3 full breaths, then closed that drawer. Grief is a room I visit. It cannot be where I live. Probate clock. At 9:03 a.m., I called Mr. Winters. Joshua's attorney measured voice. Winter scarf year-round, good at pausing where other men sell. He had already filed the probate application. I was the named executor. In Alberta, probate is the court's permission slip that lets the executor deal with the deceased's assets. Banks and registries won't move without it. He estimated 4 to 8 weeks if no one contested. Longer if anyone did. No one would, he said. And I believed him until I didn't. One more thing, I said. A 2019 deed addendum. It puts both surface and mineral rights in Joshua's name. I found a county parcel map with his notes. He went quiet in that respectful way he has. Keep the originals dry and flat. Scanned to PDF at 300 dpi. Email me the headers and registration number. Don't email the full deed. Bring the originals in person. A man called from a company, North Strike. Resources about a friendly surface use agreement. Companies use that phrase when there's urgency they don't wish to explain, he said. Do not sign anything. If they press, ask for an email with their proposed legal description and consideration. Will root through me. Winters's voice never does drama. Hearing concern there felt like the first snowmelt under ice quiet, but it moves everything. I photographed the addendum header and parcel map corners, sent only what he asked, and labeled the originals in a clear sleeve. Deed, addendum original. Labeling is a way to tell panic where to sit. What he guarded on the drive to the courthouse courier to pick up certified copies of Joshua's death certificate. I replayed the night call from Cole Parsons, North Strike. The words sat like a tool you keep near but don't name. Joshua had worked a decade in midstream logistics pipelines after extraction, not exploration. He didn't chase holes in the ground. So why buy mineral rights in 2019 and then hide the farm from me? A prairie memory arrived uninvited. A boy Joshua had mentioned once, only his cousin Wade, who broke his collarbone riding fence, and swore at the sky like it had tricked him. There are 2 kinds of men out here, Joshua said back then. Those who swear at the sky, and those who read the wind. He had always been the second kind. Buying minerals without telling me meant he'd read something coming. North Quarter at home, I spread the county parcel map again. The shaded gray rectangle was the North Quarter, with a hand-drawn arrow toward a low rise near the creek. Not high ground, not flashy. The sticky note in Joshua's disciplined block letters, keep it quiet. If this was about oil, keeping quiet avoided speculators and cousins who suddenly remember blood ties. If it was about something else, saltwater disposal, lithium brines, even helium leases, the play was the same. Stay small until you can't. North Quarter, my phone buzzed. Unknown caller. I let it go to voicemail. A text followed. Mrs. Mitchell, we can offer a generous surface damage fee and annual access rent. Coffee today. No signature, only a number with a Calgary exchange. Offers fatten before they hatch. If they were texting, they were close. If they were close, they were watching. I typed back one sentence that bought me time and leverage both. Email your legal land description, proposed term, and consideration to my counsel Mr. Winters before noon. I hit send. Then, I opened the hall closet, pulled down Joshua's old field notebook, the one with weather logs from years I didn't yet know on, pressed my thumb to the indent of his writing. The paper didn't warm, but my resolve did. At 11:42 a.m., Mr. Winters forwarded the first byte. The email header sat plain and sharp on my screen. He added one line of his own beneath it. Will acknowledge receipt only. Do not reply directly. A mediated settlement can bind parties without admitting liability. We'd use that later. But today wasn't settlement. Tit was identification. North Strike had named the legal land description down to the quarter. They were done pretending this was coffee. I opened the attachment, but only skimmed the first page before I stopped. The draft surface use agreement offered a surface damage fee and temporary occupancy lane for 30 months, renewable at operator discretion. There was no mention of separate mineral ownership. In Alberta, surface agreements must respect existing mineral rights. Omitting that isn't a typo, it's a probe. They wanted me to agree I was just a gate they could rent. Gray box. I pulled Joshua's field notebook from the closet shelf and set it next to the parcel map. He'd pressed a boarding pass stub into the back pocket, Calgary to Fort McMurray, the day before he registered the addendum. People leave breadcrumbs when they're certain they won't be followed. The doorbell rang at 11:59. A courier, in a parka, held a flat mailer requiring signature. Return address: Prairie Basin Geotech Limited. I signed with a cold hand and opened it at the kitchen table. Inside, a thin consultant invoice and a one-page geology survey memo with a small cross-section figure. The invoice listed 2 site visits, each with timestamps and GPS coordinates that landed precisely on our north quarter. The memo language was sober: shallow, gas indications along the creek-adjacent rise. Recommend core sampling and methane isotope analysis. No surface disturbance beyond handoggers performed. The invoice balance reads $0. Paid with payment received May 12, 2019. He hired them 2 days before filing the addendum. Joshua had not guessed, he had verified. Whatever he saw, he pinned down with receipts. I texted Winters a photo of the memo header and invoice top line, redacting the figure with my thumb. He called immediately. "This is the trigger," he said. "You now have independent work product, dated before the addendum. Keep originals. Bring them to me this afternoon if you can." What about North Strike? We respond once, on letterhead, acknowledging nothing beyond receipt. If they push, we remind them probate is pending, and any offer must address both estates and mineral title. Do not meet them alone. His voice slid into that slow cadence that makes men reconsider poor decisions. I kept my breathing even. I drove to the farm with the memo and a thermos of tea. The lane wore last night's thin snow like a veil. At the low rise by the creek, boot holes from an old hand-dogger grid had iced over. I crouched and touched the rim of one. The earth smelled cold thick. I pictured Joshua standing here with consultants, nodding while a young tech read readings off a handheld meter. He'd kept this from me, not because he didn't trust me, but because he trusted me too much. If I knew, I'd have fought for it before he was ready. A truck eased down the municipal road and idled 50 meters off the gate. No logo, clean tires, driver looking straight ahead. I took a photo, time-stamped it, and saved it to a folder named Range 14 Watch. My phone chimed. Winters again. Text this time. Draft reply sent. Do not engage. A second later, his email hit my inbox. The header gave me something to hold. Paraphrase of body, acknowledged. Estate is pending probate. No authority to enter agreements. If you believe you have subsurface or access rights, provide chain of title and registered instruments. Direct all further communication to council. Asking for their chain of title was a mirror I suspected they couldn't look into without blinking. I slid the geology survey memo into the same sleeve as the addendum and parcel map. Artifacts do more than prove they organize the mind. On the back of the memo, I wrote the CRIC coordinates, the invoice dates, and core sample recommended not performed. If core sampling had happened, there would be another bill. Absence is also data. 2 kinds of noise. On my way back to the truck, the wind lifted and laid the poplars down in a soft bow. A raven clacked once and flapped off. Noise, out here, came in 2 kinds, weather and men. Weather didn't lie. The unmarked truck pulled forward as I reached the gate. The passenger window rolled down halfway. A man in a dark coat leaned across. Mrs. Mitchell Cole Parsons. Appreciate your time. He had the tone of someone who practices smiling in reflective glass. I kept both hands on the gate chain. Your counsel has my answer, I said. We'd prefer to avoid delays. Friendly terms. We could include a good neighbor stipend. Probate delays everyone equally, I said. And any agreement must reference mineral title as registered on May 14, 2019. His eyes notched at the date. He glanced at his driver, recalculated, and nodded once like we'd confirmed we were both literate. Then we'll be in touch, he said, and the windows slid up. They rolled away slow, the way you leave a dog you mean to return for. The memo pulled them out in daylight. Something else would drag them into a room with signatures. I didn't know what yet, but Joshua had left me a map. I just had to read the wind he'd already read. Alberta's Land Titles Office is where rumors go to become numbers. At the counter, I requested a historical title search for NW14 to 235W4 and paid the fee. A historical title shows prior owners and every registered instrument transfers, caveats, discharges, so banks and courts can trust the chain. The clerk stamped the receipt and slid me to a terminal where the printer sighed out pages like a measured confession. Joshua Mitchell. Beneath it, a tidy ladder of instruments. Transfer of mineral rights, addendum registered, May 14, 2019 option. To lease minerals, Foothills, Mineral Holdings, Ltd. Closing parenthesis, registered, June 3, 2019. Discharge of caveat, registered, February 7, 2020. I ran my finger down the dates, as if feeling for seams. The addendum first, then a caveat from a company I didn't know, then its discharge 8 months later. A caveat is a legal flag that says someone claims an interest. Do nothing until this is sorted. I read the caveat summary line again and misread it on purpose, the way fear likes to read. Option to lease. It sounded like Joshua had given away the thing he hid. If Foothills held an option in 2019, what exactly did Northstrike think they were walking into in 2025? I paid for certified copies of the 3 entries and a copy of the chain of titles summary page. In the margins of the receipt I wrote what Winters would want: instrument numbers, registration dates, parties. When the clerk handed me the envelope, I tucked it into the clear sleeve with the addendum and geology memo. Paper made a stack. The stack began to behave like a spine. Bank memory at the bank. Mr. Aziz, the branch manager, who still wore old-school cufflinks, walked me into his office and closed the door with care. "I'll need your authorization to view archived wires," he said gently, "and I'm sorry for your loss." His hands were steady, the way good bankers' hands are. He scanned the authorization and tapped through screens that looked like they'd been designed when keyboards were beige. In Canada, banks keep wire records and can furnish client confirmations. Full details live behind another wall, but a wire confirmation is still admissible as a business record. He printed 2 pages and slid them across. Incoming wire confirmation, June 3, 2019 from Foothills Mineral Holdings, Ltd, for 25,000 Canadian dollars. Memo. Option deposit menus, NW14 to 235W4. Beneath it, a 3rd entry I hadn't expected. Outgoing wire confirmation, February 7, 2022, Foothills Mineral Holdings, Ltd, for 25,000 Canadian dollars. Memo, refund per option expiry. He took a deposit and then sent it back. I said, more to myself, option deposits are often refundable if conditions aren't met, Aziz said. It prevents a fight when a party misses deadlines. We see it with small operators. My first fear Joshua sold our secret flipped into something cleaner. He had tested a suitor, set conditions, and sent their money home when they blinked. Aziz typed again, frowned slightly, then printed a short letter on letterhead while I watched. He signed it with a quick, neat hand and stamped the bottom. To whom it may concern, on June 3, 2019, our client, Joshua Mitchell, received an incoming wire of $25,000 CAD from Foothills Mineral Holdings, Ltd, referencing an option deposit, NW14 to 235W4. On February 7, 2020, our client returned $25,000 CAD to the same originator, referencing refund per option expiry. The account reflects no outstanding obligations related to this transfer. He handed me the original and kept a copy. "If anyone pushes you about where the money went," he said, "this shows it didn't." I thanked him and asked one more question. "Do you ever file those reports when something feels off? A suspicious activity report?" We file to FinTrack when transactions meet certain triggers. The contents are confidential. If you're asking whether a SAR exists, I can't confirm or deny. But I can say Mr. Mitchell's wires here were ordinary for the period. It was the precise amount of helpful bankers are allowed to be. I put the letter and confirmations in the sleeve. The stack thickened, so did my spine. Foothills, in the parking lot, I dialed Winters and read the instrument numbers. He listened without breathing into the phone. Foothills, caveat, in June 19, discharged Feb 20, I said. Option deposit, in and out, for 25. That discharge date is key, he said. If Foothills failed to meet a condition and the option expired, their claim died with it. The discharge cleans title. It also means Foothills did diligence here and walked. Northstrike will know that. Do you think Foothills and Northstrike are the same people in different coats? Possibly cousins, possibly competitors, he said. Either way, it tells us the market sniffed and then hesitated 5 years ago. Find out why. Find out why. the words set like fence posts, the misread back at the kitchen table. I spread the caveat copy, the discharge, and the bank letter. The caveat summary used language that tripped my gut. Option to lease minerals, consideration $25,000 term, 240 days, conditions precedent, core sample, methane isotope ratio, regulatory notice to surface owner. I read the last clause again, and felt foolish. Regulatory notice to surface owner. The surface owner then was Joshua's mother, not Joshua, because he hadn't recorded the surface transfer yet. I'd been misreading secrecy as selfishness. It was paperwork in a family that didn't talk out loud. He hadn't told me because he was threading needles timing probate for his mother's care, buying both estates' room without calling the cousins. If a condition required a core sample, Foothills never did, then the hole in the ground absent on the invoice wasn't just data. It was a reason the option died. Whoever drills first owns the schedule that follows. I pulled Joshua's field notebook and flipped to May 2019, a page with weather logs, barometric pressure. Wind out of the west was followed by a single non-weather line. Wade called, told him, we're keeping it quiet. The cousin again, the boy who swore at the sky. I circled Wade's name. Phone trail I called a private investigator Winters had used for clean things. Maya Tran, not a TV shadow. Just someone who can draw lines between corporate filings and real people. The retainer letter in my inbox was one paragraph and one number. I signed electronically and sent her the names, Foothills Mineral Holdings, Ltd., Northstrike Resources, Ltd., and Wade Mitchell, alongside instrument numbers and dates. A PI memorandum done right is a who, when, what with public record references you could read in open court. Maya called me back within 2 hours. Foothills is a boutique based in Red Deer, she said. Directors are Chisholm and Abeck. Northstrike is Calgary-based. Directors include Abeck as well. Shared counsel appears in a 2021 annual return. Your Wade Mitchell has a line as a field liaison on a Foothills project 3 years ago. I'll send a memo with citations. So, they are cousins in coats, I said. At least one sleeve in common, she said. Also, a calendar invite screenshot surfaced in a director's public Vimeo. He posted a screen share by accident. It shows a 2019 call, Mitchell option Creek isotopes, with attendees in MST and CST time zones. I'll grab the URL and timestamp. The memo arrived 20 minutes later. PI memorandum, M-Tran Foothills, Northstrike, Mitchell linkages. It listed corporate registry entries, annual return dates, and the director overlap. At the bottom, public artifact, video frame director Abeck Vimeo, June 2019, shows Google Calendar, Mitchell option, Creek isotopes, attendees, time zones indicate cross-provincial coordination. She'd redacted the link in the version that would ever leave our hands. I added the memo to the sleeve. The stack now held, deed addendum county parcel map, geology survey memo, consultant invoice, historical title entries, bank wire confirmations, bank manager letter, PI memorandum, 8 artifacts and a through line that began to look like a rope. Wind reading. I drove out to the farm at dusk, needing the quiet. Scout pushed his soft nose into my shoulder and snorted like we'd both remembered a joke. I walked the creek rise again, following the faint grid of old hand-augers, the way you follow stitches in a mended shirt. Wade had been a liaison for Foothills. Beck sat on both boards. Parsons smiled out of a truck window in January, as if schedules were only for other people. The market didn't walk away, paused because the corn never happened. The hole no one drilled had become the center of the map. A raven cleaved the air and settled on the fence post nearest the rise. The snow squeaked, the air cut clean, the kind of cold that clarifies thought. I took out my phone and typed 3 lines to Winters. Core, never done. Foothills option expired. Deposit returned. Northstrike plus Foothills share director, Beck. Wade linked 2019. His reply came back in under a minute. Good. We'll define the terms of any future access. Escrowed performance bond, environmental safeguards, schedule, and restoration trust. No core without our pen. If they wanted a hole in my ground, they'd have to fill a different one first, the one Joshua left in their paperwork. By Thursday, a second courier found my door. The envelope wore a pleasant shade of legal white and the return address for Northstrike Resources, Ltd. Inside lay a 2-part performance, a cover letter titled, Access Consent Request Survey Only, and a stapled draft, labeled Mutual Confidentiality and No Disparagement Agreement. The letter invoked the Surface Rights Act, Alberta, in broad strokes, and asked for consent to enter for non-invasive surveying, flagging, and environmental baseline photography. The NDA's teeth were quieter, a liquidated damages clause of $50,000 for any breach or comment likely to impair reputation. I took a pen and wrote one sentence across the top: no entry without probate. Mineral title acknowledgement, escrowed performance bond. A performance bond forces the operator to fund cleanup if they default money held by a third party. I called Winters. He listened, then exhaled. They're skipping the surface rights board line, he said. A real pre-entry request cites the section and offers indemnity. An NDA with reputational damages is theater. We'll reply on letterhead, consent only if they stipulate mineral title on the record, and fund a bond, safeguards, schedule, and restoration trust. And if they show up anyway, call the RCMP non-emergency line, get an incident number. No confrontation. They wanted silence on paper and footsteps on snow. The first I could decline, the second I would document. That afternoon I parked by the south fence to watch the lane. A silver drone buzzed up from the municipal road, craned over the rise, then slid back toward the truck that launched it. I photographed the plate, time-stamped the image, and filed it in range 14 watch. My palms stayed open on my coat even though no one could see them. Open hands make it harder to lie later about what you did. The truck rolled forward and paused beside my gate. The passenger window slid down. Mrs. Mitchell, Parsons called, warm like coffee in ads. Our survey crew is available today. Purely visual, no soil disturbance. We can include a good neighbor stipend. No entry, I said. Probate is pending. Any pre-entry must acknowledge mineral title and fund a bond, safeguards, and a restoration trust. He smiled in efficient use of face. We're not proposing operations, he said, just measurements. If you're concerned about noise, we can keep it discreet. Noise doesn't bother me, I said. Paper does. Send Winters your stipulations in writing. He drummed a finger once on the door, and the drone lifted again, higher this time. I took another photo. You can't prevent us from viewing from the public road, he said lightly. And you can't step onto my snow, I said. We held the silence like a plank. They rolled on. I called the RCMP Strathmore detachment and reported potential trespass pressure and drone surveillance aimed at private land. I gave them the plate number, times, and my name. The constable on the line was calm and practical. Record dates and times, she said. If they cross the fence, call immediately. Here's your file. We'll note patrols. The number wrote itself into my breathing. Numbers do that. They make your body believe you have a place to stand. I emailed the file number to Winters and attached 2 of the drone photos. He replied with a single line. Good. We answer pressure with process. Process isn't drama. It's a door you close and then lock. The sound is soft, but people hear it. At 6:17 p.m., Winters forwarded Northstrike's next move, an email marked term sheet without prejudice from Parsons. A term sheet is the skeleton of a deal non-binding, but every rib points to the body you'll build. This one offered $15,000, CAD one-time $4,000, CAD immediate upon signature 36 months, automatic renewal, unless operator elects to terminate mutual liquidated damages, $50,000 omitted. Winters's draft reply set the bone differently. Explicit reference to instrument 191784443, $250,000 CAD, held by Prairie Trust Co. Baseline, monitoring, spill response, noise, light limits, $150,000 CAD, for post-operations reclamation survey. Only after bond funded and safeguards signed 12 months. Non-renewable, without fresh consent, none. Instead, no contact clause with liquidated damages payable to me if breached. If they refuse the bond on survey, he said, they're signaling they don't intend to be around for cleanup. That tells us who they are, and if they accept, then we buy visibility, without giving away our leverage. I stared at the numbers. Money on paper has a way of making grief look like a bad habit. I let the feeling pass, and returned to the facts. Kin presser. Wade called at 7:04 p.m. His voice carried the old barn dust and the new compromise of someone who needs his truck paid. I heard you're making trouble, he said. Northstrike's good people. Don't turn this into a family thing. You worked for Foothills in 2019, I said. How'd that go? He cleared his throat, a small clatter. Foothills are slow, he said. Northstrike moves. Foothills wired 25, then took it back. I said. Core never happened. Why? Not my lane, he said. Look, just sign the survey. Let the men do their job. I don't let men do jobs on my land without a bond, I said. If they default, who cleans the creek? Me. You think they'll default? I think people who push NDAs before they name the mineral instrument know what they're avoiding. He went quiet, then tried charm. You always were stubborn, Kate. And you were always in a hurry, Wade. That's why you fall off horses. I ended the call. Family pressure wears a friendly coat. The buttons never quite line up. If Wade was calling, someone had promised him something on the other side of my signature. The map grew new edges. By night I had 3 outbound items ready. Winters's revised term sheets, a short no-contact clause that tied any payment to silence from them, and a clean access denial letter for the file just in case they lost our emails. I scanned and saved them to a folder named Range 14 Outbound and printed a hard copy set to keep at the farm. Paper fences don't stop trucks, but they do stop lies. Scout nickered when I stepped into the cold, breath pluming like a benediction. I rubbed his neck and looked toward the creek rise. The air smelled like iron and snow. Somewhere, a raven called once, and then again, impatient with human schedules. My phone chimed. A text from an unknown number. If you keep blocking survey, we'll escalate to the surface rights board. You'll lose time and money. No signature. I photographed the text with another phone, printed it, and slid it into the sleeve. Anonymous pressure looks smaller when it has a page number. I typed a reply I wouldn't send. See you at the board with your bond. Then I turned off the screen and listened to the quiet. If they ran to the board, they'd have to file a public record. Public records have names, dates, and signatures. Those are the places you can stand. Winters gave me 2 names and 1 instruction. Hire the scientist before the fight. I called both and chose the one who didn't flatter me. Dr. Erin Sloan, geochemist, spent 15 years at the Alberta Energy Regulator before moving her lab into a converted tack room. Her retainer letter was 1 page. Fee, scope, confidentiality, and this line: work product belongs to client. Public testimony available if required. I signed and wired the retainer. If shallow gas is present, she said, baseline methane is step 1. Isotopic ratios tell you if it's biogenic or thermogenic swamp gas or deep kitchen. If anyone wants to drill, they prove what's already in your creek first. She texted a gear list, sample vials, chain of custody forms, 2 coolers, nitrile gloves, a handheld meter. We set first light at the farm. I'd hired a voice that turned science into nouns a judge could stack. Dr. Sloan arrived in a half-ton that had earned its dents. She scanned the rise, the hand-auger grid, and the fence where drone tires pocked snow earlier in the week. We worked quiet. She labeled vials with date, time, GPS. I initialed each chain of custody line. Baselines matter because arguments without before and after go nowhere but loud. If anyone claims contamination, she said, this shows who touched what, when, and why. Courts trust signatures more than adjectives. We took 3, Sets Creek Bend, Rise, Upstream Control. She photographed wide, then close, a laminated time card in frame. Evidence isn't a feeling, it's a sequence. At the last pit, she paused, eyes on frost around an old auger hole. You see that? A faint shimmer tore in the wind. Anomalies don't prove value, she said, but they do prove attention. At my kitchen table, she drew a simple map, 3 sample dots, a rectangle for the north quarter, an arrow for wind, environmental safeguards schedule, baseline testing, quarterly monitoring, spill kits, lighting limits, winter crossings, final line. No subsurface work until performance bond funded and restoration trust confirmed. Operators hate that clause, she said. That's how you know you need it. We added numbers. She recommended a $250,000 performance bond pegged to worst-case reclamation bank repair, contaminated snow removal, third-party labs. For the restoration trust, $150,000 with Prairie Trust Co. A trust protects you even if a company goes bust, she said. Money sits with a trustee. You and the court see the ledger. I forwarded the schedule to Winters. Scientist approved, stapled to term sheet. Once you attach science to money, someone flinches. Wade's truck showed at noon. Heard you hired a lab coat, he said. Cute. She worked at the regulator, I said. She speaks enforcement. Kate, Northstrike keeps things local. They'll sponsor the rodeo. You get a check. Everybody's happy. They can sponsor the rodeo after they fund the bond and sign safeguards, I said. Until then, the creek stays undisturbed. He glanced at the cooler. Joshua would have wanted the place working. Joshua wanted it quiet until it was ready, I said. He wrote it down. Pi Memorandum Board Minutes, Red Deer Chamber, 2019. She'd found minutes noting a foothills talk on creek isotope challenges and timing issues with surface transfer. I highlighted timing issues and filed the PDF. Attorney email header from Winters to Parsons. Subject safeguards, schedule plus bond and trust requirements. Client will not consent to pre-entry absent bonded safeguards. Probate unchanged. Route notices to counsel. That night, a knock landed on the farmhouse door that wasn't family and wasn't friendly. The man held a folder stamped Surface Rights Board. The man on my step didn't bother with warmth. He held out a folder like a citation. Delivery for Catherine Mitchell. Surface Rights Board Notice of Intention to apply for right of entry survey access. The header named North Strike Resources Ltd. as applicant, the land as, and a proposed date for a pre-hearing dispute resolution 2 weeks out. The checkbox for mineral rights holder consent attached was blank. A pre-hearing is the board's way of seeing if adults can behave before they wear robes in a room. I called Winters. They can intend all they like, he said. Without a mineral lease or license, right of entry is premature. We'll respond that title resides with the estate and that probate limits authority. Also, we'll demand disclosure, chain of title, any assignments, and why Foothills discharged their caveat. And meantime, we prepare to prove we're reasonable. We offered bonded survey, they refused. If the fight moves to a room with minutes, the person with the most verbs wins. Fordade disclosed, funded, refused. We filed our reply within the hour. Winters on letterhead, copying the board officer and Parsons. He attached the environmental safeguard schedule, the bond and restoration trust terms, and quoted instrument by number. He ended clean. Estate cannot consent pending probate. Applicant should address mineral title or await authority. At dusk I drove to the farm to clear my head with chores that don't lie. The lane was rutted from county plows. The sky bruised to the color of cold iron. At the gate, my breath left me. The east gate post leaned at an angle a post should never learn. The chain lay slack in the snow. The brass lock I'd replaced after night one sat crushed like a coin. Someone regretted. Tire tracks wide, heavy curved close and left. I took photographs from 3 distances, then knelt to frame the lock, the prints, and the splinter grain. People think pictures are for memory. They're for arguments. I called the RCMP and gave the file number. Stay outside the fence, the constable said. We'll send a car. Do not confront anyone if they return. I stood facing the road with my palms out and my phone recording, 30 seconds at a time to stamp the camera roll with time. Lights topped the Riza cruiser and, a minute later, Wade's truck like a trailing thought. The constable CSTJ Farley, badge 5834, took my statement, paced the tracks, and measured the post tilt with a small angle finder he kept in his breast pocket. He wrote 3 lines on a field note slip he'd later enter, reading them back. Attended 1912 hours, east gate post damaged, lock crushed, no entry past fence. Tire prints, wide tread, Dual's impression, likely 3/4 ton, no witnesses. File cross-reference to earlier drone complaint. Advised complainant to document repairs, maintain log. Patrol request added. We'll add it under RCMP incident, he said. If you repair, keep the receipt. It shows cost, I said, and felt the words settle like a rock in my pocket. I'd kept them off my snow. Someone put a price on that decision. Would steal, labor, sleep. Wade leaned on his fender, arms folded like he was holding in either laughter or regret. Shame about the post, he said. Winters hard on old wood. And new trucks, I said. You think I did this? I think someone who wants easy entry prefers weak fences. He held up both hands, palms outward, the universal sign for not me. His eyes tracked the constable's angle finder like he wished the tool would point elsewhere. Kate, you're making enemies, he said softly. Northstrike can help this town. Northstrike can help the board understand why they applied without a mineral lease, I said. He shook his head, smiling the way men smile when they're about to call a woman emotional and choose not to because a uniform is present. Back home, I opened a fresh page in a notebook labeled Range 14, Incidents and Costs, and wrote 3 lines. January 23, Eastgate Post plus lock damaged. $420 post plus $90 lock plus $180 installation. 2 hours lost. Sleep belongs in the ledger. Fatigue is a cost, not a mood. A pre-hearing set for February 6, 10 a.m., Calgary. He'd CCD, Dr. Sloan, and Maya. We go in as the adults, he wrote. Bring originals, I'll speak. You answer only on facts. We'll propose our bond. Trust safeguards as the path forward. If they balk, we note it on the record. And if the board nudges us to allow visual survey, we say yes if the bond is funded first. Reasonableness with conditions builds credibility. The next morning, the bank letter and wire confirmations went into a hard-sided case. I added the geology survey memo, consultant invoice, historical title entries, PI memorandum, and RCMP incident slip number on a sticky flag. The sleeve had become a spine. The spine needed a case. The case needed a hand with no tremor. Before I left, I walked to the paddock. Scout nudged my coat, searching for the apple he knew I kept. I didn't have one, so I offered my palm. He breathed into it. I counted 10 breaths and let the quiet mend what it could. On the way to the truck, my boot knocked the crushed lock in the snow. I picked it up. Its shape told the truth better than my words would. Something heavy met something unbending, and only one walked away intact. 2 weeks to the board. Enough time to replace a post, not enough to teach a company manners. We'd have to settle for teaching them vocabulary bond, trust, Title I, stamped page at a time. 2 weeks to the board meant 2 weekends to learn ground. I started in the barn loft. Joshua hid the obvious in plain boxes labeled as if they held nails. Under a tarp sat a shallow tackle box with dividers. Inside, a USB drive, a folded escrow ledger, and 3 summer photos of the creek rise flags at measured intervals, a laminated time card on a stake. The ledger showed a zero balance escrow opened at Prairie Trust Co. on June 1, 2019, listing Foothills as depositor and Mitchell Family Trust Surface as beneficiary. Escrow dormant, pending core. Escrow is a neutral pocket money, sits with a third party until conditions are met. On the USB, a folder named R1 for _core held PDFs, escrow agreement unsigned, draft performance bond language, and environmental safeguards. The unsigned escrow agreement turned my hunch into a hinge. Joshua intended to fund cleanup before a shovel moved. Foothills balked. The core never happened. Maya's update arrived at noon. Cold detail records Wade Mitchell, 2019 sourced from public litigation exhibits. She'd circled the sequence on June 2. Wade exchanged 6 calls with a Beck and 2 with a number tied to Foothills Council. She appended the calendar screenshot from that Vimeo clip. Mitchell Option Creek isotopes. Attendees in MST and CST do not circulate the CDRs widely, Winters said when I forwarded the memo. But the existence of public exhibits lets us reference prior coordination. If pressed, we subpoena. I slid her memo into the sleeve and flagged the dates in red. At the farm, I walked the north fence where the rise flattens. Meltwater cuts thin seams under crusted snow. Near an old post, I felt the give of disturbed soil. Someone had dug shallow and replaced. I scraped with a gloved hand and uncovered a fluorescent survey whisker snapped at ground level. Fresh plastic in old dirt is a sentence a judge can read. I photographed, logged GPS, and slid the whisker into a bag. Dr. Sloan texted when I sent the image. Visual only cruise, mark, bag it, note, date and time. Baseline, safe, every piece felt like a coin. Enough of them pay for a door to open in a building with microphones. Performance bond, language draft, and restoration trust terms draft. Joshua's numbers matched Dr. Sloan's within a few thousand. His default clause was clean. Operator failure triggers immediate draw. Trustee disperses first to water remediation, then soil, then access repairs. He also specified quarterly trustee reports, balance, interest, disbursements, signatures, an attorney email header to Joshua's subject, Foothills, term sheet edits, date, May 30, 2019 with a margin note in Joshua's hand, added bond, trust, baseline, removed NDA. Wade opposed. I still needed the reason Foothills walked. Dr. Sloan called with a boring possibility, which is another word for likely. If the creek's isotope ratio hints biogenic gas, smaller operators hesitate, she said. A core would have clarified. No core, no courage, and North Strike. Different appetite or a different target. They might be sniffing helium mixed with gas or planning saltwater disposal using injected storage. Either way, demand their chain of title and intended regulatory filings. If they refuse, you've learned enough. The cleanest leverage is a question the other side cannot answer on paper without shrinking. Back in the loft, I read Joshua's margins. Taped under the lid was a county parcel map duplicate with a new annotation. SW culvert underrated. A culvert too small means spring melt, jumps banks and carves ruts. In front of the board, that becomes risk to agricultural use and helps a surface owner restrict sloppy roots. I called the county roads supervisor and requested the culvert capacity log for the municipal road by our quarter. He emailed a PDF within the hour. Culvert inventory road 14, listing diameters, install dates, last inspections. The southwest culvert was undersized, flagged for replacement in spring. I added it and wrote, East approach only. Limit spring crossings. That night I laid the artifacts in order like rungs. Geology memo plus invoice, May 12, 2019. Wire confirmations and bank letter deed addendum, May 14, 2019. Foothills caveat plus discharge, June 3, 2019. February 7, 2020. Escrow ledger dormant, plus draft bond, trust PI memorandum, linking Beck, Wade, and calendar RCMP, incident number 202-504-1873, and gatepost photos, culvert. Inventory and bagged survey whisker connections clicked. Foothills balked at bonding and a core. They backed away clean. North Strike wanted quiet entry. Wade wanted a sponsor and a check. Joshua wanted escrow to hold strangers to promises and a trust to clean what they broke. My job was to carry those lines from paper to voice before a board officer and a clock. The board will listen to title, safety, and money, parked with someone paid to say no until yes is earned. I can do that voice. I have his map. I built a wall out of ours. Feb 4 held Dr. Sloan for a dry run. Feb 5 held Winters for exhibits. February 6 held the board. I printed an agenda and taped it to the farmhouse fridge beside Joshua's maple leaf key. We set roles. Winters would speak to title, probate, and process. I would answer on facts only, dates, receipts, observations. Dr. Aaron Sloan would translate the creek into sentences a hearing officer could write into an order. Maya would sit behind us with her PI memorandum open to the page that put Beck on both companies and Wade in their calendar. Retention beat. Plans fail when voices wander. Ours would walk in a line title safety, money, then access with conditions. Exhibits we numbered the spine. Exhibit A, deed, addendum instrument. Exhibit B, historical title entries showing Foothills caveat and discharge. Exhibit C, bank manager letter with wire confirmations. Exhibit D, geology survey, memo and consultant invoice. Exhibit E, PI memorandum. Exhibit F, environmental safeguards schedule. Exhibit G, performance bond and restoration trust terms. Exhibit H, RCMP, incident with GAT. We lead with title, Winters said. They will frame this as a surface squabble. It isn't. Scripts we practiced, we rehearsed, likely questions. Mrs. Mitchell, why won't you allow survey access? Because applicants refuse to acknowledge the recorded mineral instrument and refuse to fund a bond or safeguards. I will consent when both are in place. Isn't a bond excessive for measurements? Measurements trigger schedules. The bond protects the creek if mere becomes more, and it is ordinary when operators claim urgency. Are you opposed to development? No. I insist on discipline, title clarity, baselines, bonded cleanup, and transparent money. Retention beat. Simple sentences carry farther than speeches. We trimmed anything that sounded clever. Sloan's chalk. Dr. Sloan drew a shallow cross-section, frost line, creek silt lens, and the rise. She wrote 3 isotope ratios, labeled biogenic, thermogenic, and mixed. Then circled a box baseline gen duopulumpat, chain of custody attached. She added 1 line, no subsurface work until bond and trust funded. They'll try to bait you into value, I said. I will not value, she said. I will describe. Maya's role was edges. If Parsons claimed Foothills never looked at the site, Maya would read 1 neutral line. Board Minutes 2019 note, a Foothills talk on creek isotope timing. Citations listed. If Wade claimed he never coordinated, Maya would keep her eyes down. Winters would remind the room we could subpoena carriers if needed. We wouldn't waive call records unless cornered. The calendar screenshot would do its quiet work. The Ask Winters wrote our ask on one page titled Proposed Resolution Board. Records acknowledgement of mineral instrument 191784443. Applicant funds $250,000 performance bond with Prairie Trust Co. Applicant funds $150,000 restoration trust with the same trustee. Parties sign the environmental safeguard schedule. Limited visual survey permitted after items 1 to 4. No subsurface activity without fresh consent. No contact clause requiring all communications through counsel. Violation triggers $25,000 liquidated damages to the estate. If they accept, Winters said, you gain visibility and discipline. If they refuse, the record shows who blocked progress. Winning here wasn't a cheer. It was a ledger entry. Funded, signed, filed. Family variable Wade was the variable. I called him before the hearing. You'll hear my name, he said. They'll try to drag me. I won't drag anyone, I said. I'll read dates. If you're asked, tell the truth. He exhaled. Take the check if they offer it. Kate, you're tired. I'll take the bond, I said. Tired people love guardrails. I staged 2 bags, the exhibit binder in a hard case, and a satchel with water, apples, copies of the probate application, and a notebook labeled Board Day. I added the crushed lock. It wasn't an exhibit. It was for my hand. Weight steadies the chest. Night before, I set a new post straight and hung a heavier chain. Scout watched, ears flicking like he was reading the wind. Joshua felt first. I pressed my palm to the wood and counted to 12. I set my clothes out in quiet order tonight. Then I went home, set 3 alarms, placed the binder on a chair by the door, and finally slept. Forward pull. Morning would put us in a room where story turns into minutes. I had hours in ink. The hearing room held winter light and the scrape of chair legs. Board officer Ms. Duarte sat behind a stack of binders. Parsons and a junior associate took the applicant's side. Winters and I sat opposite. Dr. Sloan and Maya behind us. Ms. Duarte opened briskly, pre-hearing on North Strike's intention to apply for right of entry. Survey access only, NW 14 to 23-5, W4. Let's see if we can avoid a contested application. Winters rose. Executor Catherine Mitchell acknowledges the board's process. Title is determinative. We propose limited visual access after conditions. Acknowledgement of recorded mineral instrument 191784443, a $250,000 performance bond with Prairie Trust Co., a $150,000 restoration trust, and assigned environmental safeguards. Schedule: estate authority is constrained pending probate. These conditions protect the land if survey becomes more. Parsons smiled the way people do when they dislike witnesses. We object to bells and whistles from binoculars, he said. This is not invasive. We offered fair surface compensation and confidentiality to avoid gossip. Compensation without title is theater, Winters said, and confidentiality is not a condition the board should supervise. Duarte's pen paused over 191784443. Ms. Duarte turned to Parsons. Does your package acknowledge mineral title? Minerals aren't at issue, he said. We're not producing, we're measuring. Acknowledge, or not, she said. He hesitated. Not as drafted. She nodded, then looked to me. Mrs. Mitchell, why are bonds necessary for a survey? Because schedules begin with measurements, I said. If noise, lights, or spills occur, the bond and trust fund cleanup, monitored by a trustee who reports quarterly. We have baseline samples and chain of custody to establish before. Dr. Sloan, Duarte said. Sloan stood. Baseline methane collected January 24. Isotopic analysis pending. Our safeguards, schedule limits, spring crossings, requires spill kits, and forbids subsurface work without fresh consent. Safeguards are routine in responsible operations. Parsons shifted. We can live with a safeguards document. But a $250,000 bond for photographs? Winters lifted Exhibit B. Historical title shows foothills. Caveat, in 2019 requiring a core sample and regulatory notice to surface owner, discharged when conditions weren't met. Applicant's director A. Beck served foothills then and North Strike now. The market paused once. Conditions prevent repeats. Parsons flushed, irrelevant, and personal. Public registry entries, Winters said, and sat. Ms. Duarte read silently. Then, to Parsons, if I recommend limited access, it will include conditions. The board expects operators to acknowledge title. Do you have any subsurface rights to present? Not at this time, he said carefully. Then you're here by invitation only, she said. Let's discuss terms you can accept. We slid our proposed resolution across. Parsons scanned and reached for a pen like a man negotiating the weather. We'll acknowledge instrument 191784443 for the purpose of access, he said, and sign the safeguard schedule. The trust at $150,000 is surplus for photographs. The trust protects reclamation if survey expands by accident or intent, Winters said. It sits until sunset or cleanup. Interest accrues to the estate. Parsons tried a new door. We'll fund a $50,000 bond, no trust, access for 60 days, and standard confidentiality. No confidentiality, I said. A no-contact clause instead. Northstrike speaks only to counsel. Violations pay $25,000 to the estate. Anonymous texts have already arrived. Ms. Duarte's eyebrow lifted. I'll note the communications issue. Parsons's pen stopped. Math was hunting him. Bonds are money you can't spend. Trust funds are money you can't pretend. He tried leverage. If we file right of entry, you'll lose time and perhaps face costs. File, and you move us into public record, I said. Either way, we insist on title acknowledgement and funded cleanup. Duarte angled toward compromise. Mr. Parsons, bond at $200,000, trust at $100,000, safeguards as drafted, title acknowledgement by instrument number, visual survey only for 90 days, no subsurface work without fresh consent, communications through counsel. I'll minute it as a recommended resolution. Can Northstrike accept? Parsons looked at his associate, then to us. If we can call the bond refundable at term absent incident and affirm the trust returns if unused, we could consider unused funds return when conditions end, Winters said. We'll state it plainly. And can we cap liquidated damages on the no-contact clause at $10,000, $25,000, I said. He exhaled. Northstrike accepts the officer's recommendation with those clarifications, Ms. Duarte wrote in a hand that makes future arguments shorter. The board minutes will reflect. Applicant acknowledges mineral instrument funds at $200,000 performance bond with Prairie Trust. Funds a $100,000 restoration trust. Executes respondents limits access to visual observation for 90 days. No subsurface work. Communications via counsel. Optional no contact clause with $25,000 liquidated damages. She looked up. Anything further? Winters lifted the RCMP incident number. There was gate damage and drone harassment. We expect applicant to instruct its contractors accordingly. Parsons nodded. Stiff. Will comply. Duarte closed her binder. Gravel crunched under our boots outside, conditions sticking. Now the money had to move from talk to trust, from sentence to signature. That's where most men blink. We'd see who looked away first. The next morning began with signatures. Winters sent final PDFs at 8:12 a.m., the environmental safeguards schedule, the no-contact clause, and the board minute recommendation. I signed. Parsons's digital signature landed 5 minutes later. The board clerk emailed a confirmation. Minutes entered. Parties encouraged to proceed per recommendation. Encouraged is how bureaucracies bless a deal before it has bones. At 9:31 a.m., Prairie Trust Co. called to verify identity. The trustee, Ms. Comer, spoke like a metronome. To instruments, she said, Item 1, performance bond for $200,000, refundable at term absent incident. Item 2, restoration trust for $100,000, returning if unused after 90 days and inspection. Quarterly statements to Estate Council and the board file. Wire details to follow. At 10:06 a.m., a wire confirmation hit my inbox. Northstrike to Prairie Trust for $200,000. At 10:18. The second for $100,000. The trustees' follow-up noted both funds received and segregated, with account numbers ending -7426 and 1139. She attached a trustee acknowledgement letter. Funds held. Disbursement per schedule. Quarterly reporting per clause 4. I printed 2 copies and slid one into the sleeve. Money had moved from talk to ledgers. When numbers become statements with logos, pressure changes direction. I felt it ease off my chest and settle on theirs. Sloan met me at the farm to implement the schedule. We set reflective stakes along the allowed survey path, hung spillkit lists in the tack room, and taped a laminated baseline log to the barn wall. Dates, samples, temperatures, initials. She placed a locked pelican case on the shelf. duplicate vials and forms, she said. If something spills, we mirror the sample and call the lab. She photographed each setup with the day's newspaper in frame. At noon, I drove into town and bought a treated 6x6 gatepost, 2 bags of Quikrete, a length of grade 70 chain, and a heavier brass lock. The clerk offered a discount, which I declined. Clean books are stronger than favors. Back at the farm, I dug, plumbed, and set the post while the concrete steamed in the cold. I logged the receipts in incidents and costs and stapled copies into a pocket labeled repairs. At 1:47 p.m., Winters forwarded an email from Parsons captioned survey commencement notice. It included a crew list, a vehicle roster, and a reminder that access was visual only. It also repeated, communications limited to council per clause. I texted Wade, crew start tomorrow. Stick to the road. He replied with a thumbs up emoji. The rule wasn't no men on my land, it was men on my land obey paper. Watching that line hold as its own kind of oxygen. The crew arrived just before dusk to stage. 2 trucks idled on the municipal shoulder. No one crossed the fence. One man raised a hand. I raised mine. I walked the paddock. Scout grazed the crusted edge of a round bale. I fed him an apple and recited the numbers, 200, 100, 90 days. Back home, Maya S. Memo updated the watch list. Beck S. LinkedIn added a post about community engagement in Range 14. She appended board minutes draft showing our terms. Winters filed a notice of council lonely communications with the board and copied the RCMP file number. At 7:22 p.m., a local Facebook group posted that Northstrike partnered with me. I replied once on my page. Access by board recommendation with safeguards, bond, and trust. No subsurface work. Then, I closed the app. Public narratives multiply when fed. Starve them, and they look elsewhere. Before bed, I reread the trustee letter. The words felt like rails my day could run on. I put the crushed lock back in the case as a reminder. Some lessons you don't unlearn. I slept lightly, boots ready. By morning, the survey would begin under our rules. That's usually when operators try a different door PR, family, or a doctor's note. The knock came sooner than I'd planned. Morning broke 2 headlines. A slick press release header from Northstrike landed in local inboxes. At 8:06 a.m., community partnership at Range 14, environmental baselines underway. The body called me a cooperative surface owner, folded in phrases about shared stewardship, and quoted an unnamed local liaison. They had not copied Winters. A press release is a mirror made to show what someone wishes were true. I called Winters. We don't fight adjectives, he said. We enforce clauses. ILL. Send a cease and desist letter limited to misuse of partnership and breach of no contact if they sourced quotes through back channels. While he drafted, my phone throbbed with texts. The school fundraiser chair wanted to know if Northstrike's community grant could sponsor the library. The rodeo posted a thank you to corporate friends. Then Wade called. Kate, good news Northstrike's sponsoring for H. They can fix the North Culvert too. They can bid on the culvert when the county posts it, I said. Public procurement, not PR. Don't be rigid, he said. People remember who helps. They remember who breaks and who pays to fix, I said. We already have a trust for cleanup. That's help. Generosity without ledgers is a costume. They'd dressed the town before they'd washed their hands. At 9:12 a.m., a Surface Rights Board clerk email arrived. We VA posted the officer's recommendation to the file. I clicked the link public now, black type on a white page. Bond, trust, safeguards, title acknowledgement, no subsurface work. I copied the URL to a document and closed the tab. Public record beats public relations. 10 minutes later, the detachment called. Ms. Mitchell, this is Constable Farley. We received complaints of interference at your range. Anything to report? Crew stayed to the road, I said, but a press release suggests partnership without my consent. Also, local pages are heating. Understood, he said. We'll note calls to your file. Keep logging. I opened incidents and costs, and added a line. PR surge. Time diverted. 2 hours. Time is a cost. Measuring it prevents resentment from pretending to be strategy. A calendar invite screenshot popped up in Maya's email. Town Hall Range 14 opportunities, booked at Community Hall, Friday, 7 p.m. Organizer ABEC. Guests Wade Mitchell, Chamber of Commerce Board. She pulled it from the Chamber's shared calendar page, public when someone forgets to toggle private. Her memo attached citations. They'll frame you as the obstacle, Maya said, then offer scholarships. We won't attend, Winters said when I looped him. We'll publish one neutral post linking the board record. No adjectives. We posted. Board recommendation filed. Limited visual access for 90 days. With $200,000 bond. $100,000 trust. Safeguards. No subsurface. Communications through council. I pinned it and stepped away. At noon, Miss Colmer at Prairie Trust called. Routine notice. She said, we VA received a call from Northstrike asking whether we routinely reduce bonds midterm for cooperative landowners. We do not. Funds remain per instrument unless both parties sign an amendment. Thank you, I said. If they send you any proposed changes, copy our counsel. Per clause we must, she said. They were already trying to loosen the rails they'd just nailed. Paper remembers. Afternoon wind sharpened. The crew paced the road shoulder with clipboards and rangefinders like metronomes, set to brisk. Dr. Sloan and I checked stakes and logged photos. A silver SUV rolled up and idled. The passenger window slid down to reveal a woman with camera-ready hair and a microphone logo on her lapel. Mrs. Mitchell Weir, live at noon. Mind sharing how Northstrike's investment will help local families. We don't comment live, I said. The board record is public. 90 days. Visual only. Bond and trust funded. No subsurface work. So you support the development. I support rules you can audit. She pivoted to the SUV camera and smiled. Soundbites thrive on verbs. I'd given her 6 that couldn't be trimmed into a cheer. By 3, another knock. A courier handed me a letter on law firm letterhead representing Northstrike. It demanded I refrain from statements likely to harm reputation, citing the NDA I had refused to sign. Winters replied within the hour, with our cease and desist. No NDA exists. Our client has made no disparaging statements. Your press release mischaracterized a board recommendation. Further direct contact violates the no contact clause. Liquidated damages $25,000 apply. He copied their general counsel and the board file. Wade arrived at dusk, hat in hand and a look I recognized from boys who want to borrow tools they will return dented. They're offering me a coordinator job, he said. Decent money. Health benefits. Congratulations, I said. Do the job well, and respect the fence. They say you're stopping progress. Progress is 90 days with a bond and a trust, I said. If they want more, they can file for it in daylight. He shifted. You could make this simpler, Kate. I could make it faster, I said. Not simpler. Simple as rules, applied the same no matter who parks outside. He wanted permission to skip the queue and call it neighborly. I left him with a line he could repeat if he wanted employment more than affection. Night came with a text from an unknown number. Town needs you on side. Don't make this personal. I screenshotted and filed it. Then I wrote one line in my notebook. They can own the microphones. We own the minutes. PR spent itself in air. Money and beds of creek run in the ground. Tomorrow, I asked the trustee for the first quarterly reporting template and draft the clause for what happens if Bishel tried to grow hands. Endgame belongs to paper. They tried the night because daylight had rules. At 4:12 a.m., Scout snort woke me. An engine idled by the municipal road, then cut. Frost glittered. The east gate post stood true. I set my phone to record and stepped out. 3 figures moved along the north fence, headlamps dark. A drone case between them. I dialed the RCMP and spoke time and place into the lens. Gen 29 Jum 4 lewat 16 menit range 14. While dispatch held the line, a red LED blinked to life. They climbed the fence. Scout blew hard. I lifted my free hand and said the clause they feared. Board recommendation visual only. No subsurface. Council only communications. Bond and trust funded. Sentences don't negotiate. The cruiser topped the rise inside 7 minutes. CST Farley and a partner called the men to the fence. One claimed he was flagging sightlines. Bolt cutters and shovels answered that. Farley photographed tools, names, plates, and noted the drone. He didn't arrest. He documented, warned, and told them to leave. Consequences don't always click in cuffs. Sometimes they click in ledgers. By 7:30, Winters had my video and Farley's note number. He filed a notice of breach of board recommendation with the clerk and copied Northstrike and Prairie Trust. The trustee, Ms. Comer, replied, per instrument, breach authorizes withholding release of bond trust at term pending inspection. Money had a spine. Parsons phoned Winters, not me. He said misunderstanding and subcontractor. Winters answered with nouns. Bolt cutters, names, timestamps, RCMP, addendum. Then, we discussed this in a controlled room. We had one by noon. Mediation appointment, Friday 9 a.m., Crown Winter Law. I printed fresh sets, RCMP addendum, drone photos, no contact clause, safeguards schedule, trustee email. Dr. Sloan and Maya stood by. Mediation rooms smell like upholstery and restraint. The retired judge, Ms. Beatty, set rules, one voice at a time. Facts before adjectives. Northstrike arrived with Parsons and counsel Ms. Halden. Parsons opened, "We regret the pre-dawn confusion. The crew overstepped, they crossed a fence with bolt cutters." Winters said, "That's not confusion, that's a breach." Parsons pivoted. "The site's potential warrants speed. Delay hurts both parties. Speed without conditions costs more," I said. "The trustee now holds your bond harder." Halden studied the trust clause. "If we fund an additional escrow for damage, can we ensure bond release at term?" "Escrow doesn't erase breach," Winters said. "Release ties to inspection and compliance. But you can buy certainty a different way." He slid a settlement term sheet across spare and precise, $325,000 CAD to the estate within 5 business days. 12-month option to negotiate a mineral lease. No operations. Access remains visual under safeguards. Expanded to affiliates. $50,000 liquidated damages per breach. No admission of liability by any party. Existing $200,000 bond and $100,000 trust continue. Any breach extends term. Parties acknowledge RCMP incident number 202-504-1873, addendum. Northstrike instructs contractors within 24 hours. Narrow regulators and board may receive numbers. No partnership press. Failure to fund or any breach triggers $200,000 to the estate. Northstrike pays mediation. Parsons scoffed. Halden did math. $325 for an option with no drill rights is steep. It buys time. Without a public beating you will lose. Winters said, "You are already opposite a trustee and a board minute. Director overlap with foothills won't read well beside a second disregard of conditions." $250,000 and narrower no contact, she countered. $300,000, I said, and $50,000 stands. Posts, locks, and sleep aren't free. Price your boundaries, and you learn who truly values time. They caucused. Dr. Sloan texted from the hall. "Rules are mercy for people who like shortcuts." I counted artifacts in my head. Halden returned. $300,000. 12-month option only. No press. No contact at $50,000. Add mutual non-disparagement accepted. Winters said, "If non-disparagement sits beside disclosures to board, trustee, and regulators are not disparagement." He added a line for the minutes. "A mediated settlement can bind parties without admitting liability. Payment ties to a no-contact clause." We signed the mediated agreement at 3:42 p.m. Halden wired $300,000 at 3:57. The wire confirmation hit my phone at 3:59. Ms. Comer acknowledged receipt for the trust file. Maya photographed signature pages and logged times. At the door, Parsons tried charm. "We all want what's best for the community." "I want what's best for the creek," I said. "Communities drink before they cheer." Winter light felt like a verdict. We hadn't won a fortune. We had bought a year and proved that rules, enforced, turn cowboys into correspondents. That evening, I fed Scout, then walked the creek bend. Ice made a skin over slow water. On my phone, the trustee's template for quarterly reporting arrived. Balances, interest, notes. I filed it and wrote one more line in incidents and costs. Mediation day. Hours, 9. With money banked and minutes filed, one choice remained: what to keep, what to sell, and how to hand my daughter a map that taught discipline louder than inheritance. Probate arrived on March 3rd. A thin grant with a heavy consequence. With authority in hand, Winters filed the land transfer. So title read Catherine Mitchell, executor. Then Catherine Mitchell, individually. We recorded the mediated agreement and board minutes on the title index, so any future suitor met our conditions before they met me. I opened a separate checking account labeled Range 14 Operations and moved the settlement funds there. From it, I paid invoices cleanly. The new gate, Dr. Sloan's lab bill, Maya's memorandum, Winters's fees, and the farm insurance rider adding non-operational survey activity to coverage. I mailed a copy of the rider to the trustee. Paper speaks louder when it arrives from two directions. Security moved from hope to habit. A pole-mounted camera faced the east gate, one aimed at the creek. I posted a small sign with 2 lines, accessed by board conditions only. Cameras on. Farley logged a follow-up patrol, nodded at the new chain, and reminded me to keep a repair kit in the truck. I added one, alongside apples for Scout. Northstrike paced the road like penitent metronomes. They kept to the lane. When the reporter returned, I gave her the same sentence I'd rehearsed. 90 days, visual only, bond and trust funded. She aired it without music this time. PR had met minutes and decided to nap. Lena came home for a weekend between midterms. We walked the rise while the wind wrote little fingers in the snow. "You're different," she said. "I'm practicing being exact," I said. "Your father read the wind. I make lists and tape them to doors." We stood by the creek where the ice thinned to glass. I handed her a folder labeled, "If something happens to me." Inside, the deed, the board minutes, the trustee contact, passwords, and a 1-page letter in plain words: "Do not sell under pressure, demand bonding, safeguards, and a trust. Money is a tool, sleep is wealth." She slid it into her backpack like it was a book she intended to finish. On the last day of the survey window, Dr. Sloan delivered her quarterly trustee report template filled with zeros. No spills, no breaches, bond and trust intact. We sent it to Prairie Trust and to the board clerk. Comer replied with a stamped acknowledgement and a calendar note for the next quarter. I replaced the crushed lock in my case with the new one's receipt. The shape of my fear had changed. It now looked like a ledger that balanced. One act remained: deciding the farm's future without Joshua's map, and choosing a legacy we could live inside for us. At first I thought the farm was a secret Joshua kept from me. It wasn't. It was a promise he left me to keep with rules written in the margins where only discipline can read. I used to think love was soft. Turns out, love shows up with a binder and a pen that doesn't skip in the cold. Scout knickers when I cross the yard before breakfast. The new post throws a plum shadow. The creek carries last winter forward under a thin pane, quiet as breath behind glass. I touch the maple leaf key and feel the weight of small metal doing large work. Gates, doors, filing cabinets that open only for names that match. My daughter says I talk in bullet points now. Perhaps. Lists kept me from bargaining with fear. Baselines and bonds did something gentler. They let me sleep without inventing endings. Sleep is the truest luxury I've ever purchased, and I bought it with words like instrument, escrow, trustee, and incident number. People ask if I'll sell. I answer honestly, I don't know. Maybe I'll lease when the science justifies it, or maybe I'll keep feeding a good horse and measuring the creek. Both choices honor the man who read the wind and the woman who learned to chart it. Legacy isn't a shrine, it's a ledger you maintain with your own hand. Before I lock the tack room, I slip one more page into the sleeve, a note to myself for the next time a friendly truck idles at the road. It's only 4 lines. Acknowledge title. Baseline first. Bond and trust funded. All talk through counsel. That's the map, as simple as I can make it. If you've faced something like this, I hope my receipts help you sleep. And if you haven't yet, then borrow my list. It's not a sword. It's a fence you can carry light enough to lift, strong enough to lean on when the weather or men grow loud. For the record, that's how I kept the farm, and how it kept me. If you're still here, thanks for listening, and I'll meet you in the comments. Your voice matters.